My beloved child, before another ordinary thought quietly slips across your heart, remain here for just a little longer, because some conversations are never meant to be overheard, yet they leave echoes that travel farther than anyone expects. There is something remarkably gentle about the moment you are about to witness, not because it began with certainty, but because it began with hesitation. Your soulmate carried a question for longer than anyone realized. They smiled when others were watching, spoke as though everything was ordinary, and kept moving through familiar days. Yet beneath that calm surface rested a feeling they could no longer explain away. It was not loud enough to demand attention from the world, but it had become impossible to ignore within themselves. And so, instead of searching for another distraction, they turned toward the one person whose voice had always mattered whenever life became too complicated to understand. Their mother noticed the silence before she noticed the words. Sometimes love reveals itself that way, not through speeches, but through the unusual quiet that settles over someone who has finally decided they can no longer carry everything alone. Don't skip, because this quiet moment is where everything slowly begins to change. She placed a warm drink on the table without asking why they seemed distant. She simply waited. No pressure. No interruption. Only the kind of patience that invites hidden truths into the light. Your soulmate looked down for a long moment, as though searching for the right sentence among countless unfinished thoughts. They spoke your name carefully, almost protectively, as if even saying it aloud carried a meaning they were still learning to understand. They admitted that something about you refused to leave their mind. They could move through busy days, meet familiar faces, finish responsibilities, laugh at ordinary moments, and somehow your presence still lingered quietly in the spaces between every thought. They confessed that they had tried to explain it logically, but every explanation felt incomplete. There was always one missing piece they could never quite find. Their mother listened without interruption, her expression becoming more thoughtful with every passing sentence. She did not rush to answer. Instead, she studied the emotion behind the words, because experienced hearts often recognize feelings before younger hearts are willing to admit them. Stay till the end, something important is waiting for you. Then something unexpected happened. Your soulmate stopped speaking altogether. The silence itself seemed to reveal more than any sentence ever could. Their mother leaned back slowly, not with surprise, but with recognition. It was as though she had quietly connected several moments she had noticed long before this conversation ever began. She remembered the small changes no one else had paid attention to. The brighter smile that appeared without explanation. The thoughtful pauses whenever your name entered a conversation. The way ordinary stories somehow found their way back to you. Piece by piece, an invisible picture had been forming, and now she could finally see it clearly. She looked directly at your soulmate with an expression that carried both warmth and unmistakable certainty. Her next words arrived with unexpected emotion, not because she wished to shock them, but because she could no longer keep her realization inside. Her voice rose before she even realized it had, and she exclaimed, "You are." The room became completely still. Your soulmate froze, not because they feared what would come next, but because something inside them already sensed those unfinished words might explain feelings they had never been able to describe for themselves. And in that suspended moment, before the sentence could be completed, everything changed in a way neither of them could have imagined. The unfinished sentence did not disappear into the silence, it settled there, inviting every heartbeat to lean closer. Your soulmate searched their mother's face, hoping to understand what had caused such an unexpected reaction. It was not confusion they saw. It was recognition, the quiet kind that comes when someone suddenly realizes a story has been unfolding long before anyone noticed it. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, almost as if she wanted to choose her next words with extraordinary care. Then she smiled softly, the kind of smile that carries both tenderness and certainty, and said, "You are already letting this person change the way you see your future." Those words did not arrive with dramatic force. They arrived gently, and that gentleness made them impossible to ignore. Your soulmate looked away, not because they disagreed, but because hearing their hidden feelings spoken aloud felt strangely overwhelming. They had never intended to reveal so much. They thought they were simply describing someone they admired, someone they couldn't quite understand. Instead, they had quietly revealed the direction their heart had already begun to travel. Their mother noticed the silence returning again, but this time it was different. It was no longer the silence of uncertainty. It was the silence that follows an unexpected truth. She leaned forward and asked a question that seemed almost ordinary. "When was the first moment you realized they stayed with you even after they were gone?" The question lingered in the room. Your soulmate did not answer immediately. Instead, memories surfaced one by one. They remembered a conversation that had lasted only minutes but somehow stayed with them for days. They remembered smiling unexpectedly while doing something completely unrelated. They remembered catching themselves wondering how you might react to simple moments in life, as though your perspective had quietly become important without asking for permission. None of those moments had seemed significant by themselves. Together, however, they formed something impossible to dismiss. Don't skip, because the smallest memories often reveal the biggest truths. Their mother listened as each memory slowly unfolded, never interrupting, never rushing the story forward. She seemed less interested in the events themselves than in the emotion hidden beneath them. Finally, she nodded, almost as though she had been waiting for those very details. "People often think meaningful connections announce themselves all at once," she said gently. "But sometimes they arrive so quietly that you only recognize them after they've already become part of your everyday life." Those words settled deeply within your soulmate. For the first time, they stopped trying to explain their feelings away. They stopped searching for perfect logic. Instead, they simply allowed themselves to acknowledge that your presence had become meaningful in ways they could not measure. Stay till the end, because this conversation is only beginning to reveal what has been quietly growing beneath the surface. Then, just when the room seemed to have found its peace again, their mother stood up and walked toward an old cabinet near the window. She opened a small drawer that your soulmate had almost forgotten existed. Inside rested a neatly folded envelope, untouched for what looked like a very long time. She held it carefully, turning it over in her hands before looking back with an expression that blended warmth, reflection, and quiet anticipation. "There is something I never expected to share today," she whispered. "But after hearing everything you've told me, I think it's finally time." Your soulmate's curiosity grew stronger than ever. They had come expecting comfort, perhaps advice. They had never imagined this conversation would lead to something their mother had apparently kept hidden for years. As she slowly reached for the seal of the envelope, the room grew still once again. And whatever waited inside seemed ready to reveal a connection neither of them had seen coming. Just as the envelope rested between her hands, an unexpected hesitation crossed your soulmate's face. It was not fear. It was the quiet awareness that some moments cannot be returned once they begin. Their mother noticed immediately and gently lowered the envelope back onto the table without opening it. "Before you see what's inside," she said softly, "there is something far more important you need to understand." Those words shifted the entire atmosphere. Suddenly, it no longer felt as though the answer was hidden inside folded paper. It felt as though the answer had been quietly growing inside your soulmate all along. They looked up, searching for a clue in her expression, but all they found was remarkable calm. She folded her hands together and began speaking about something she had observed for weeks without ever mentioning it. Whenever your name and this person's name found their way into the same conversation, she explained, your voice changed. Not louder. Not softer. Just different. As though you were speaking about someone who made the future feel a little less uncertain. Your soulmate blinked in surprise. They had never noticed that about themselves. They had believed they were hiding every feeling with careful words and ordinary smiles. Yet someone who loved them had quietly seen beyond every attempt to appear unchanged. That realization settled deeply. Sometimes the people closest to us recognize our hearts long before we do. Stay till the end, because another quiet truth is about to unfold. Their mother smiled warmly and continued. You think you've been wondering whether this person belongs in your life. But that's not the question you've really been asking. Your soulmate frowned gently. Then what have I been asking? The answer did not come immediately. She allowed the silence to breathe, giving the moment room to become meaningful. Finally, she said, you've been asking whether you're ready to become the person you are whenever you think about them. The room seemed to stand still. Those words reached somewhere deeper than expectation. Your soulmate suddenly realized that every conversation about you had never been only about you. It had quietly revealed the version of themselves they wished to grow into, more patient, more hopeful, more present, more willing to believe that meaningful connections are built one honest moment at a time. Don't skip, because the next realization changes the direction of everything. Their mother gently rested her hand over the unopened envelope. This, she whispered, is only a reminder. The real answer has already appeared in everything you've shared today. Your soulmate looked at the envelope again, but this time with different eyes. Curiosity remained, yet it was no longer desperate. They understood that whatever waited inside could never be as powerful as the truth they had just discovered within themselves. Then, almost unexpectedly, their mother laughed quietly. It wasn't laughter born from amusement. It was the kind that comes when countless small pieces finally fit together into one beautiful picture. There was one moment, she said, when I knew this conversation would eventually happen. Your soulmate leaned forward immediately. Which moment? She looked toward the window, remembering something from weeks earlier. You came home after seeing them. You didn't tell me where you'd been. You didn't mention their name. But you spent the entire evening smiling at absolutely nothing. Your soulmate's eyes widened. They remembered that evening perfectly. They had thought no one noticed. They had believed the feeling would quietly fade by morning. Instead, someone had been watching with gentle understanding all along. Their mother reached for the envelope once more, slowly sliding one finger beneath its seal. Now, she whispered, you're finally ready to know why I kept this, and why the first time I saw your connection to this person, I chose not to say a single word." As the paper began to open, a single photograph slowly emerged into the light, and the expression on your soulmate's face changed before they had even seen it completely. The photograph did not reveal everything at once. It slipped from the envelope with quiet simplicity, landing gently between them as though it had been waiting years for this exact moment. Your soulmate stared at it without speaking. At first, it looked ordinary, a forgotten snapshot from an everyday afternoon. Yet the longer they looked, the more details seemed to emerge. Their mother watched carefully, not searching for surprise, but for recognition. "You see it now, don't you?" she asked. Your soulmate nodded almost imperceptibly. "I remember this day." It had been an ordinary gathering filled with familiar conversations, gentle laughter, and countless small moments that most people would never think to remember. But in the corner of that photograph, almost unnoticed, was an expression your soulmate had never seen before. It was their own face, completely unguarded. No careful smile. No effort to appear composed. Just a quiet sense of peace. Their mother smiled warmly. "I kept this because it reminded me that the most meaningful changes rarely arrive with dramatic announcements. They appear in the smallest moments, long before we understand what they mean." Your soulmate looked back at the picture, noticing something else. Everyone around them seemed occupied with their own conversations, yet their attention had naturally drifted toward you. It wasn't obvious enough for anyone else to notice, but once seen, it couldn't be unseen. "I never realized." They whispered. "No," their mother replied gently. "Because you weren't trying to prove anything. You were simply being yourself." The room became peaceful again. The photograph no longer felt like evidence. It felt like a quiet reminder that genuine feelings often grow without asking for attention. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Then their mother folded the photograph carefully and returned it to the envelope. "There is one part of this story I've never told you." Your soulmate looked up immediately. "What part?" She took a slow breath before answering. "The day after this picture was taken, someone came to me and asked a question about you. At the time, I didn't think much of it. But after listening to everything you've shared today, I finally understand why they asked." Your soulmate leaned forward. "Who was it?" Their mother smiled, not with mystery, but with quiet affection. "If I tell you now," she said softly, "you'll understand why today's conversation feels less like a coincidence, and more like the moment every small piece has finally found its place." The name rested on the edge of her lips, waiting for the next heartbeat before it would finally be spoken. A gentle silence settled over the room before her answer finally arrived. It was the kind of silence that does not create distance, it creates space for something meaningful to be heard. Your soulmate waited patiently, realizing that some names carry more weight when they are spoken without haste. Their mother looked toward the window for a brief moment, as though revisiting a memory she had carefully protected, then turned back with a calm smile. "It wasn't a stranger," she said quietly. "It was someone who had simply noticed what everyone else had overlooked." Your soulmate felt curiosity rise again. "They asked me a very simple question," she continued. "Have you noticed how peaceful they seem whenever that person is mentioned?" Those words lingered in the air. There had been no gossip. No dramatic assumptions. Just an honest observation from someone who had quietly witnessed the smallest changes. Your soulmate searched their memory, trying to imagine who could have seen something they had barely admitted to themselves. Their mother gently folded her hands. I didn't answer right away, she admitted. Because I wanted time to watch. Feelings deserve patience before they deserve conclusions. Your soulmate lowered their eyes with a thoughtful smile. For the first time, they understood why their mother had never rushed to offer advice. She had been allowing the story to unfold naturally, trusting that genuine emotions become clearer with time rather than louder with pressure. Don't skip, because the next realization is the one that changed everything inside the room. Their mother leaned forward. Do you know what convinced me? Your soulmate shook their head. It wasn't the way you spoke about them. Another pause. It was the way you listened whenever someone else did. That sentence reached deeper than expected. Your soulmate remembered countless conversations where your name appeared only briefly. They had always paid attention without realizing it. They remembered asking quiet questions, noticing little details, hoping to understand more. Not out of curiosity alone, but because every new piece somehow mattered. Their mother smiled warmly. When someone's happiness quietly becomes important to you, even before you expect anything in return, that tells a beautiful story. The room felt lighter. There was no need for grand declarations. No need for impossible promises. The truth was unfolding through ordinary memories, each one gently confirming the last. Then their mother stood once more and walked toward a nearby bookshelf. This time she did not reach for another envelope or photograph. Instead, she picked up a small notebook with a worn cover. I've written thoughts in here for years, she said. Nothing extraordinary. Just moments I hoped I would never forget. She opened it slowly, turning several pages until she found one marked with a tiny pressed flower. I made this note long before today's conversation. Your soulmate watched silently. She read only a single sentence. One day they will understand why this person's presence brought out the calmest version of themselves. Your soulmate closed their eyes for a moment. It was not because every answer had finally appeared. It was because they suddenly realized that the most meaningful discoveries rarely arrive all at once. Their mother carefully closed the notebook and held it against her heart. There is only one memory left, she whispered. I've never shared it with anyone, because I wasn't sure it belonged to me to tell. Your soulmate looked up, sensing that whatever came next would not be louder than everything before it, but somehow, it would feel even more meaningful. And with that final thought resting gently between them, she began to recall the one conversation that had quietly connected every piece of the story in a way neither of them had ever imagined. The memory did not arrive like a sudden revelation. It returned gently, as though it had been waiting for the right moment to be understood. Your soulmate watched their mother's expression soften, noticing that she was no longer searching for the perfect words. She was simply remembering. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, she began quietly. Nothing about that day suggested it would stay with me. Yet somehow, it never left. Your soulmate remained completely still. I saw the way you spoke about them without even saying their name. A puzzled smile crossed your soulmate's face. I don't understand. You were telling me about your week, she explained. You mentioned places you had been, people you had met, little moments that seemed completely unrelated. But every story quietly circled back to one person. Not because you forced it, because your heart naturally carried them there. Your soulmate searched their memory and slowly realized she was right. There had never been a dramatic confession. There had never been a single moment when everything suddenly changed. Instead, your presence had quietly woven itself into ordinary conversations, ordinary thoughts, and ordinary hopes until it no longer felt separate from the future they were beginning to imagine. Stay till the end, because the smallest realization is often the one that stays with us the longest. Their mother continued with remarkable calm. People often wait for certainty before they trust what they feel. But meaningful connections rarely arrive with certainty first. They begin with kindness. They grow through consistency. And one day you realize that someone's presence has quietly become part of your peace. Those words settled into the room like sunlight through an open window. Your soulmate didn't rush to answer. For the first time, they weren't trying to solve a mystery. They were simply allowing themselves to appreciate how naturally every piece had found its place. Then their mother reached into the notebook once again. Between 2 pages rested a small folded note, no larger than the palm of her hand. "I almost threw this away," she admitted with a gentle laugh. "Why didn't you?" "Because something told me it might matter one day." She unfolded it carefully. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't advice. It was only one sentence she had written after watching your soulmate return home months earlier. She read it aloud. "Some people don't change who we are. They quietly remind us of the person we've always hoped to become." The room fell silent once more. Your soulmate lowered their head, not because they were overwhelmed, but because those simple words described something they had been trying to understand for so long. They realized that every conversation, every memory, every unanswered question had been leading toward this gentle truth. Their mother smiled, seeing a quiet confidence beginning to replace uncertainty. "I've told you everything I witnessed," she said softly. "The rest of the story doesn't belong to me." Your soulmate looked up. "Then who does it belong to?" She smiled with quiet warmth. "To the moments that haven't happened yet. They will be written one honest conversation, one thoughtful choice, and one small act of kindness at a time." Your soulmate looked once more at the photograph, the notebook, and the folded note resting side by side. None of them predicted the future. But together they reminded them of something even more valuable, that the strongest connections are often built patiently, gently, and with genuine care. As the evening light filled the room, one final thought crossed your soulmate's mind, a thought they had never spoken aloud before, yet one that now felt impossible to ignore. And that quiet realization would become the very first sentence of the next chapter waiting to unfold. Morning arrived with an unusual sense of stillness, as though the conversation from the night before had not truly ended, it had simply found a quieter place to rest. Your soulmate woke earlier than usual, not because they had somewhere urgent to be, but because their thoughts had gently returned to everything their mother had shared. The photograph. The notebook. The simple sentence that had lingered in the room long after every other word had faded. None of it demanded an answer. Yet all of it invited reflection. They walked into the kitchen where sunlight rested softly across the table. Their mother was already there, calmly preparing breakfast as if nothing extraordinary had happened. She looked up, smiled, and immediately understood that the silence between them carried a different feeling now. "You've been thinking," she said warmly. Your soulmate nodded. "I keep wondering why this feels so different from every other conversation I've ever had." She placed a cup in front of them before answering. "Because yesterday wasn't about finding certainty. It was about recognizing what has been quietly true for a long time." Those words settled gently. Your soulmate looked out the window, remembering countless ordinary moments that suddenly no longer seemed ordinary at all. A smile that appeared for no reason. A conversation replayed long after it ended. The quiet comfort that arrived whenever thoughts of you crossed their mind. None of those moments had seemed important on their own. Together, they formed a picture that had been patiently waiting to be noticed. Don't skip, because sometimes the smallest realization becomes the one you remember forever. Their mother sat beside them instead of across from them. "Can I ask you one last question?" Your soulmate smiled. "I think I'm finally ready." She paused, choosing each word with care. "When you imagine the future, what is the first feeling that appears?" The question caught them by surprise. It wasn't about plans. It wasn't about perfect timing. It wasn't even about answers. It was simply about the feeling that appeared before every detail. Your soulmate closed their eyes for a moment. "Peace," they whispered. Their mother smiled immediately. "I was hoping you'd say that." There was no excitement loud enough to fill the room. No dramatic declaration. Only a quiet sense that something genuine had finally found its name. She reached across the table and gently rested her hand over theirs. "Hold on to that feeling," she said. "Life changes in many ways, but peace is one of the clearest signs that you're walking toward something meaningful." Your soulmate looked down thoughtfully. For so long they had searched for certainty in perfect words, perfect moments, and perfect explanations. Now they understood that the deepest connections often grow through ordinary kindness, patient understanding, and quiet trust. Stay till the end, something important is still waiting for you. As they prepared to leave the house, their mother called them back one final time. "There is one thing I almost forgot." Your soulmate turned. She smiled with the same gentle expression she had carried throughout every conversation. "If you ever meet them again, don't try to impress them with perfect words." They waited. Simply let them meet the person you've become. Those words stayed with your soulmate long after they stepped outside. The morning breeze felt lighter. The road ahead looked exactly the same as it had the day before. Yet somehow, everything felt different. Not because the world had changed, but because they had. And as they quietly walked forward with a calmer heart, they had no idea that somewhere, at nearly that same moment, another ordinary day was beginning. One that would unexpectedly bring your paths closer than either of you could have imagined.